Good morning, gentlemen, and happy Macho Monday to you. Again, I'm Josh, student pastor here at Holiday Hill Church, and I am filling in for Pastor Albert, not just for Sunday, but for one more Macho Monday. So, yesterday we were discussing the Holy Spirit and how the Holy Spirit is a very active person of the Trinity, and how even sometimes in Baptist life we treat the Holy Spirit like a redheaded stepchild. But the Holy Spirit, he plays a huge role in the life of a believer. And we talked about that. But again, there are some stories that just don't make the Sunday morning illustrations. And this one was in part because our kids were hanging out with us that Sunday. No children's worship yesterday. So this one made the cutting room floor because the kids were in with us, but also I thought as I'm researching this, I'm like, this is a total guy story right here. This will work out really well. If you didn't know, Summer Olympics starting up soon. And Louis Zamperini was a child of Italian immigrants in the early 1900s. And he didn't even know English until well into his elementary school years. And as a result, being in the States and Italian immigrants in the early 1900s very much picked upon. And he got bullied a lot. And so he was, I guess you could say, raised into a rough lifestyle. By his own admission, he started smoking and drinking when he was 5. And he learned boxing to defend himself. And his older brother saw the writing on the wall. His older brother knew that this was going to be destructive if this keeps up. So, brother decided maybe he should take his convictions and focus them on something more positive, and got Louis into track running track and racing. And he started getting really good at it. Won a championship, got a scholarship to Southern California, USC, where he was part of the Kappa Sig fraternity. And he got so good, in fact, that he was invited to be part of the Olympic trials in the 1930s. Usually you had to pay your own way, but see, Dad, he worked for the railroad, so he actually got to travel cross country from California all the way to New York for free, courtesy of Dad working for the railroad. And he made it in. He went to the 1936 Berlin Olympics. And though he didn't finish in the top 3 in his event, his final quarter mile, his final lap, was very impressive, to the point that Adolf Hitler wanted to meet him and shook his hand, and and Adolf Hitler told him what a wonderful runner he was. He comes back home and becomes quite a bit of a celebrity for just being this tough as nails, never give up attitude. And he, like many men during that time, joins in with the military during the war effort of World War II and does a lot of his work in the Pacific. He at one point was part of a search and rescue mission, and that search and rescue mission went south very fast. 11 men on a plane crashing in the Pacific Ocean. 8 of them dead immediately. He's one of the 3 survivors. Him and the 2 other men float in a raft for almost a month, living on rainwater and killing albatrosses and using them for baits to eat fish raw. And then sometimes they eat the albatrosses themselves raw to survive. And just about 1 month, one of the 3 men passes away in the raft. The other 2, after 40 days out in sea, and at one point being shot at by Japanese planes, sea land, they floated about 2,000 miles to the Marshall Islands, where they were rescued by the Japanese. He was then put into a POW camp where he was beaten and tortured regularly for several years. When the Japanese found out that they had an American celebrity in their midst, they tried to force him to read off a card spouting Japanese propaganda, and he refused to do so, where they then put him and tortured him some more. Ultimately, the United States won. Ultimately, Louis was freed from his prison camp. And he met a lovely lady when he came back to the States. They got married. He proposed to her 10 days after meeting. And life at that point seemed pretty good, except for the fact he suffered nightmares. Why wouldn't you? How could you not? He had lots of nightmares involving all that he had endured over the last few years. His wife comes back to him one day, telling him about this guy that she went to go see, a guy by the name of Billy Graham, and how she has now dedicated her life to Jesus Christ. And she wants Louis to come along too. And at first he was not game for this. He thought this was the dumbest thing ever. But he saw the passion in her voice and in her heart, how she's talking about Jesus for 30 minutes straight. And he thought, okay, I'll give it a shot. To appease her, I'll go check the guy out. Went to one of his tent meetings, and he heard the gospel of Jesus Christ. And then he went back and remembered all that he had endured. And by his own admission, he says, even the most ardent atheist starts praying in the foxhole. He's like, if you think you do that in the foxhole, imagine what you do in a raft when you're floating out in the middle of the ocean for 30 days straight. And he remembers the time plane was crashing. And he called out to God, saying, God, if you'll spare me, I'll serve you. He was in the raft, and he would call out to God, God, spare me, and I'll serve you. He was in the POW camp being tortured, and he would pray, God, save me, and then I'll serve you. And he was reminded of all those times he made those promises. And now here he is. God has spared him. And now came the moment of truth. Louis accepted Jesus Christ. And in doing so, he agreed, I'm going to serve him. Louis made his way back to Japan. Met many of the guards who had tortured him. He forgave them. In 1998, Louis was in Japan carrying the Olympic torch of the 1998 Nagano Olympics. Louis, his story is absolutely amazing. Made into a movie called Unbroken, directed by Angelina Jolie. He's since passed away. But the story of who he is lives on. Guys, the Holy Spirit directs. The Holy Spirit orchestrates. There was a lot of things in Louis' life that were very scary. And there were many moments, I believe, that he thought all hope was lost and this is very much the end. But God looked after him. God watched over him. And his Holy Spirit directed him into the moments that needed to happen to turn him into the man that he became. Guys, what events in your life, if we were being honest, we can look back on and say, I think God's Holy Spirit was directing me in these moments. They may have been harsh, they may have been scary, they may have been dark. But you learned something nonetheless, and you're still here. What has God given you that you can share with others? What lessons has God taught you that you can pass on to someone else? Whether it be your kids, your grandkids, your co-workers, your neighbors, whoever. Something to consider. Follow the leading of God's Holy Spirit. Who knows where it might lead? Take care. God bless.